Hello, everyone. My name is Elsa Amelia. I am starting a YouTube channel called Amelia's Cuentitos in honor of my grandmother from my dad's side, who I don't know much about, but I do carry her name. Um, and I'm starting at the very end of 2024. This is January 31st of 2024. With great anticipation, hopefully this channel brings us, if not much experiences and much, um, and we can leave a recording, I guess, or a testimony of the things and the stories, cuentitos, and lives of the people that lived along the Rio Grande or in the side of Mexico, El Rio Bravo. Little bit about myself. I grew up in Reynosa, and I love the border because um, I loved one of my favorite authors that grew up in the valley. Her name is Gloria Ansaldúa, and she finally called this land a no man's land. In her words, it's an open wound where the third world grates against the first and bleeds. But it's not only a site of marginalization, but also resilience and creativity. We embody the strengths and struggles of our people, right? We have been so resilient because we have meshed these two cultures. Um, at one point, Gloria Anzaldúa called it an open wound, but I think we're mending it pretty well. Como decía mi mamá, remendábamos los pantaloncitos, and it would make them better, it would make them last, it would even make them nice and more comforting now, right? So the stories that I'm about to share in this channel have to do with the people of the border. I started writing little stories for a very long time, and I kept them and kept them and kept them, and I didn't know of a place to share them with or on. So I think this is a really good place for me to share them, about all the experiences along the border and here in Alton and Reynosa, where I grew up. I call my channel Desde la Banqueta de mi casa, porque that was where the grown-ups, right after having dinner, they would sit outside to cool off and to let that meal settle in. And the children would get to play one last time, before going to bed and going to school the following day. That's where all the neighbors would be outside in their little rocking chairs, sharing a little chismecito and talking about the past and about the everyday things. And we got to see everybody's way of living and the little stories and lives of everybody. So my first story that I'm about to share, it's not the first one that I wrote, but it's the first one that I wanted to share. And this story happened, or this cuento, happened way before I was born, in that banqueta, and it happened in that banqueta. So I just want to share with you guys, and I hope you guys like it.
There she sat in La Banqueta at 2 in the morning, quietly weeping. A chorus of crying children called for their mother. She was dressed in her nightgown. Shuddered with anguish, the realization hit her. She'd lost her children. She distinctly worried about her 2-month-old. As the sound of his cry reached her ears, her breast began to lactate. A 4-year-old breath-catching cry from inside the house said, "Ama," lamenting between breaths and sobs. "No te quiero ver aquí cuando regrese," he threatened before leaving to park his 18-wheeler. She sat there unfazed by the potential consequences. There was nowhere to go. They'd elope at just 16, trying to find love where love wasn't around at home. Upon discovering his first infidelity after the birth of their eldest child, she contemplated leaving him. On one of his long-haul trips from Mexico City, he brought home a woman he said was his cousin. Her intuition said otherwise. Jealous and fiery, she decided not to soportar sus chingaderas. The following day, she walked to her mother's home, a tiny house constructed from recycled wood, its gray exterior marred by gaps incapable of retaining warmth during the winter. Dirt floors contributed to the perpetual layer of dust that clung to the sparse, worn-out pieces of rusted furniture. Daughter in arms, she arrived at her mother's jacalito. Dejé a Benito. Her mother sat her down. No, mijita. Esta es tu cruz. Go back. Face the consequences. Besides, ¿qué vas a hacer sola con esta criatura? Cradling her newborn, paralyzed, realizing she had no refuge, her mother gathered her bags and promptly steered her back to her own home. Benito reasoned with her. Who's gonna help me raise my brothers? Who's gonna raise our little girl? Orphaned at 12, Benito shouldered the responsibility of raising his two little brothers, one 14 and the other one 10. Now the responsibility fell on her. Constrained, trapped by guilt, duty, and the consequences of her youth, there she was in La Banqueta, 4 kids later, at 22. Benito had a ride home at 1 a.m. from Veracruz. A suitcase was by the edge of the terraza. It was unlike any of the ones inside their closet. Face flushed with anger and heartbreak, he furiously unzipped it to explore its contents: men's clothing, pants, shirts, underwear, and hidden at the bottom, a pornographic magazine. Enraged and disrespected, he didn't kiss her. He didn't hug her. No benefit of doubt, guilty before explanation. He yanked her from the bed, unleashing at her. Since another man is coming to my house, you have no business being here. Te me largas. This is no longer your house. These are my children. You will never get to see them again, he shouted, somehow afflicted by the amnesia of her sins. In this house, the burden of honor falls upon the woman. Her perceived transgression outweighed the concerns of raising his children and kin. Drowsy, in pain from her twisted arm, she struggled to make sense of his fury. What could she have possibly done to upset him? What man? This suitcase. Whose suitcase is this? He threw it onto her feet. No lo sé. Perplexed, she tried to answer, but she had none. Now she sat alone, a thin woman drained by her child while trying to provide nourishment. Sapped by the worries of 4 children, 2 younger brothers-in-law, an unfaithful husband, and an accusation of infidelity herself. A neighbor unexpectedly appeared. What are you doing here, Adriana? Adriana looked up at her. Tears dampened her eyes and caused her green eyes to twinkle as the light from the nearby lamppost reflected off them. Es que, no sé qué pendejo, someone left his suitcase on my front door. Ahora Benito cree que lo engaño, she murmured with bowed head. I know, Adriana. No, my brother just arrived and couldn't locate our house. He mistook your house for ours and briefly put his suitcase down. He realized his mistake. He walked a bit further and eventually found us. We were so happy to see each other, he completely forgot about it. We came back to look for it together. The neighbor draped her arm around Adriana, offering solace, while the brothers stood awkwardly to the side. They waited until Benito returned. After many explanations and apologies, Benito accepted their account. They left quietly. Adriana wiped her tears away, still seated in La Banqueta. He opened the door, letting her intact honor in. His was abandoned many years ago with no assurances of return. There weren't any apologies for the accusations. He climbed into bed and slept soundly. She ate to her children, consoled them, fed the newborn, and tucked them into bed.